basically, this is kind of the resume format that seem to be very effective for my clients. So this one again went through multiple trial and error runs, and then I, kind of narrowed in basically through A/B testing, I would say, that we got this to essentially work. So you can see there's essentially one, two, three, four, five, six. There's a 7 section, which is the hobbies section. There's about 7 sections in this resume. So these are the things that I would say I'll kind of walk through how to essentially update these areas. But having basically these 7 sections seems to be what we figured out in my research specifically, that people seem to be interacting with the resume longer, and they're most likely to get you a link to an interview as well. So the first step essentially is making sure that you have your header of your resume, right? Your email address, and make sure the email address that you set, it actually reflects your name, because I've seen a lot of people still tend to use outdated email addresses or not so professional email addresses in their resume. So that's something I say and I recommend to a lot of people. Make sure that you at least for your job search, make sure that you keep a email address that is actually professional sounding. So that's a key thing to remember. And also for your phone number, you obviously make sure that you put your phone number and have that displayed correctly, and make sure that it's double check. Because what I remember, I had a situation for me, my own resume, I had the wrong phone number for a while. So don't make the same mistake that I've made. And also for your address, so you don't need to put the full address. That's something that I've seen. Not every, you don't need to really do that, as long as you have your city and country. That should be most of the time good enough. But there is, sometimes, I've noticed that I've thought, certain recruiters find it, it builds a little bit more trust when they put the full. But then again, I wouldn't really emphasize that too much. As long as you put your city and country, that should be good enough. And another thing I would say that seems to be, like, again, my research actually showed this as well, and somebody else did research on this, adding a LinkedIn link to your resume, like this, like a hyperlink in it. So that seems to be also seen to increase the trust with the recruiter. So something that I would also recommend anyone in this call to do as well. Okay. So that's something to keep in mind. Let me see. Also, it says Kelly had a question. So whenever you apply for new role, do you have to always update? I don't really recommend that. As what I usually say is that have your like the job title that you're actually planning to get, right? So if it's completely off, like for example, if you're doing like customer service, but then you need to become like a director of like project management, obviously that won't be true, right? So what I would say is that I would say something that you essentially can represent to yourself right now is what you should be in your LinkedIn. But like we can essentially talk a little bit about this more. I can offer a free call to anyone who needs it. Basically, what I recommend is like just keep it at like the current level as much as possible. But if there's any specific things that you can do for the company, we can put it on as one of the phrases and things like that. So that's one of the things. So I don't recommend updating it all the time, but as long as you do have something, like we will talk about what you should, like, the things about 8 or so things that you should have in your LinkedIn profile, that should be good enough. So let's see. Okay, perfect. So that's, and for the professional summary section, so this is another section in the resume that we have experimented with, and we had a lot of successes with, essentially stating certain very specific thing in your professional summary. For example, how many years of experience you have had in the industry. So that's something that we have noticed that recruiters like reading. and also mentioning about type of problems you worked, or types of projects you worked while you were in your past roles. Also, we have seen to be highly effective when you state right in the beginning of your resume. So these two things we've seen to be very effective when you put. And also things like software tools you used, any specific tools that are particular to your role. And if you were to like identify right in the beginning of them, they seems to really like that. And another one would be essentially like if you have completed specific certifications or designations that is relevant to the job. These things also become really valuable and useful when you're creating it. So again, it's the years of experience, type of jobs, or number of projects you specifically completed, if you have that number. And if the tools and the skills that you have had experiences with, right? Like specifically if you had experience with Salesforce or MS projects or something like that. Again, a lot of companies are now emphasizing on the software tools specifically. You need to master. So stating that would be ideal. And then also if you have any specific designations and so forth. Okay. Okay, so let me see. Any questions? Lamin, so I see your question in some AI assist. So they can be useful. Let me see. However, unless it's quite similar, most time there's a between. I mean, you wouldn't need to update for every one of them. I think using AI definitely can be useful because it does kind of put the certain phrases in a better way, right? So if we can talk a little bit about how your resume looks like individually. You can honestly book a call with me for free to kind of look at like how your resume look like. But yeah, I mean, as long as it's making improvement to your resume, that's the key thing, right? And it doesn't. And if you were to give it to your friend or give it to somebody and get their feedback on how their resume look compared to the ones you had before, as long as you can see a market difference in them, like the language and everything, it should be okay. But I would say, like with like a website, right? Like resume is like your probably most important asset for your career. So continually keep it updated and create multiple versions of it to kind of test out and show to people so that you can get their feedback. Okay, so very important to like. I think it's like many people I see is like they spend a lot of money on education, but like things like personal branding equipment, like resume is super valuable, and it basically can determine the amount of money you make. It's something that people should be spending more time and effort to kind of continually improve it. You don't need to get it perfect, obviously, right? It's improving it is the key, I would say. Okay. um, and also basically, yeah, displaying your skills and abilities sections, again, something that we have noticed that resume recruiters seem to really like. So basically these words that I usually get from if you were to read about 15 to 20 job descriptions, right, for the job that you're applying for, your ideal job, you can start to kind of get an idea of what type of skills that the companies are looking for. Like for example, if you're applying for like project management role, right, you need to learn to do project planning, right? So things that come up, and things like communication, and also the fact that you need to use a tool like MS projects or Asana or something like that. So if you have these skills that are relevant to the job descriptions that companies are posting, so these becomes your ideal skills and abilities to post or to put in your resume. So make sure that you do have a section like that, like this one you see, or the second one, like that, so that you can display that. Again, and we notice that it makes it easier for people to read your resume if that it's broken down. Like sometimes you will notice that it's the repeated information between professional summary and skills, and which is fine. People just need to read that, right? So having in multiple places is completely fine if that the case may be. Okay. So feel free to ask questions if anyone has. So we'll talk about that, Jackie, a little bit. Um, if whether you can put hobby again, it depends on the role you're applying for, right? So we'll talk about that a little bit um, more. So let's go back to this section. So basically, the experience section is one of the things that I would say, most important things is that, identifying type of responsibilities you had on your previous roles is the key, right? And basically, you turn them into, past tense, right? And if I was essentially involved in, planning and executing, career development programs and professional development program. So that's what one of my responsibilities were, right? So the way I put it, as essentially planned and executed. And if you ideally have a number, right? So again, this is something that we've noticed that recruiters really seem to like, is putting quantification on context, using numbers to the experiences that you have had, right? If you worked on a specific number of problems, you can mention that. If you worked on specific number of projects, you can mention that. And if you created certain documentation or tools, things like that, you can mention that. You don't need to put all the bullets as with numbers. You just focusing on 2 to 3 for each job. Just each job responses set that you have should be more than good enough. So let me see a little bit of income, and then do you think? Yeah, so for Jackie's question, so as long as it aligns with the role that you're looking for, it should be okay. So I mean, again, some employers, they don't really like. I notice I've seen both. Like I've hired people, and I enjoy when people are doing freelance work, because it's they're learning few things on the side, right? So again, it depends on the employer. And it depends on the type of work that you're applying for, Jackie. So if you're applying for things that are in line, right, that basically has cross functionality or cross responsibilities, then I would say, it's a good idea. It might be a good idea to add. But if it's, very different from what you were doing, what the roles that you're applying for, then I would say, think about that. Because if it's aligned, ideal. If it's not, like responsibilities wise, the work wise, then I would think about it a little bit, because you don't want them to think you're doing too many things, right? And whether you would have time for the role. So that's the kind of the way I would think about it. If you need to ask, we can have a set up a call and chat about it more. But essentially, that's the kind of thing I would think about. Yeah, go ahead. Is it Chisel? Chisel? I can't hear you. I think it's on mute.
Okay, yeah, better.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Um,
Perfect.
yeah, thank you so much. I actually joined late.
Oh, that's okay. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so um presently looking for co-op opportunities
Okay.
because I'm a postgraduate student.
Okay.
So I have like 4 months for summer co-op. So I
Okay.
was wondering if if this also applies to me or if there's anything I can do differently, to
Yeah.
tailor my resume for those core positions. Am I going to use the professional summary or am I going to use an objective? Like,
Yeah.
what can I do differently
Yeah.
when it comes to my own resume? Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Great question, Jason. So I've actually helped quite a number of recent graduates as well. So one of the things that I actually use is similar format. So I would talk about type of experiences, like sometimes it might be say, oh, I had years of experience. You can say certain number of months of experience, or certain number weeks of experience that you had in doing specific type of tasks, right? So let me go back a little bit. Right, so that's something that we tested. We for one of the students, she recently graduated. She didn't have a lot of experience either. So what we did was, using her like volunteer experience and everything. So basically, we said, she had this many months of experience in this industry, so forth, right? So I would still kind of, as much as you can, use experience as the primary thing to display. But and then you start to talk about specific things like your education, things like that, which I'll show you. But again, what I recommend, even if you're, I know it might be a little bit too late for, if you're applying already, but having you're doing, like, you're working on projects on your own, you're trying things out on your own, it has a huge impact on your resume, especially for students. So whether you started your own project or own company, things like that, if you're a student, this is so key. Like, I would say, like even my first role, I got it because I did something on my own. And there's so many people that are even executives that when I'm coaching them, one of the things I tell them is, like, at least, join a club, and volunteer, or take on a membership, things like that, or start your own side hustle thing to just kind of experiment with your skills and abilities. And if you have something like that, at least something minimal, you can really expand the experience section on your resume, and then kind of talk about that in your resume in that sense. So I don't know, Chisholm, if you did any projects on your own, or if you work for any company. I think that's, I would say, if you can highlight that and maximize how much you put in, that would be the right way to go.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Thank you.
so if you need to chat with me, talk a little bit more with me after.
All
Okay.
right. Thank you. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
you had a question. I think you had one before.
Oh no, I'm all good. Thanks.
You good? Okay, perfect. Raise it. Please go ahead.
Okay, hello again. And
Hello.
I have a question about the experience part. I have a
Sure.
very actually special situation.
Okay.
As we talked before, um, I had my own company for 10 years,
Yeah.
and I was working for my own company, but and I'm a newcomer here in Canada. So the situation is I was involved in many different projects,
Right.
software development projects. And for example, the long-term projects, it was,
Right.
for example, 18 months project, 1 year project. So actually, I actually worked on that particular projects with the
Mm,
role of software manager, software architect, or different roles.
okay.
So I don't know how to reflect these two in my experience parts. Should I mention that I had been working for only one company, or I can mention about the project, because each project that actually is like I'm working for a different company, because
Right.
I was involved with their team, with their infrastructure,
Right.
and that's my question. I hope I could actually explain it well. So if you get my question, I can
Yeah.
continue.
No, I get your question, Reza. So I think like I've seen, like, couples with this can be displayed, right? Obviously, you talk about all the responsibilities the way I've kind of talked about, right? Like, just bulleting them one after the other. But one of the things, another pattern that I've seen, especially, like, the type of work you have done, you can kind of break them down based on, basically write down the title, you write down the work company you work for, and then basically you project by project break it down, right? Project A, you did these three things, or two or three things. Project B, you did these two or three things, right? So you started to, like, write them down project by project, if that, because honestly speaking, like, as a recruiter, I would rather read that shows me more credibility, because I know, like, okay, you actually worked on a project and you actually did these things, right? So the way you were thinking, which is based on breaking down project by project, I think that would be useful, I think, in my opinion, for a role like that. Let me know if I'm answering the right question, Reza. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, but should I reflect this strategy to my LinkedIn profile as well?
So yeah, so LinkedIn is a different story. But if you can kind of do the same thing and kind of do an underlying thing or something like that, again, like I'm just looking at from a person like hiring, right? For me,
Yeah.
that just it builds a little bit more credibility, to be honest, because you're literally mentioning of the project name and you're literally listing out things you did in the project. So if you can do that on LinkedIn as well, right? Because it's kind of you can write a little bit of a description of what you did on the role, and then you kind of break it down project by project, if that's the case. So that would be, again, it would contribute to building credibility and building trust.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
I'll talk about it later in a private session. Hopefully.
Sounds good, no problem.
Thank you.
Very good. Yeah, so that's one of the things I would say is like, at least one of the things that for anyone I say is like, at least start breaking down your resume in this format, like all these sections. You can over time kind of add it and modify it as you see fit. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the way I would put help or position. So if anyone need, because one of the things that I do help people is, I help people create their resume, work portfolio, cover letter, and LinkedIn, and also interview coaching. So it's something that I do offer. You can kind of get my help as well. But one of the things, if you're doing on your own, kind of make sure that you have those sections first outlined, then you improve them over time. Don't try to, cramp everything together. Okay. So again, not cramping things together. This is another point that I want to talk about, is basically separating out the certifications and the education section. So the reason I say that is because when you're experienced in your career, you tend to take courses and certifications that are more relevant to the job than what you would have studied in for your diploma or your degree. So one of the things that I tell my clients that I also had a lot of luck with is separating out the certification, because I realized that recruiters love to look at this section and kind of make their initial filters and whatever, right? So make sure that you separate out the certifications or courses section from your education. And if you're not taking I would say, like, if for anyone, right? So if you're in project management or customer success, even that area, having some sort of a course or designation that you're pursuing is actually very useful and very valuable. Like, it's something I pay attention to a lot when I'm like hiring for a project manager. Even if they don't have a degree in project management, I'm just saying, okay, do you at least know the fundamentals? Do you know the basics? So having like a certificate done or something along those things done, or you're doing currently, it's going to work out for you well. So that's something I want to tell you about. Go ahead, Tessa.
Sorry, so my question was for the previous section. I just recollected it. So my experience is primarily based in Dubai, in the UAE.
Okay. Yeah.
So do I need to reflect that in my resume? Because it's already on my LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But I don't want to subject myself to a bias of the Canadian experience.
Right.
So should I or should I not reflect it?
Yeah. So I've noticed, like, this can be handled two ways, right? Because sometimes I've seen like people like, like most of the clients that I've worked with so far, tend to be Canadian. I kind of put that Toronto, Ontario, but that's always not necessary. You know what I mean? The thing is, especially now with the way we are going, it's like we are like a lot, like when I worked for my previous consulting company, a lot of my colleagues were not from Canada, right? So we're doing the same work, right? So the work, I feel like it's becoming a lot more similar in nature, right? So it's not necessarily matter, but the thing is like how you write that content down, obviously, becomes important. But I wouldn't I would, again, like, this is like I said, that's why I told, like, the A/B testing your resumes becomes valuable, is basically kind of for this issue. So you can try one without putting your putting the city and see if there's some sort of an effect, because if what if there is an effect, right? So, but as long as you clearly talk about like the projects you worked on, I think that's obviously that, right? So that becomes more important essentially going forward. So test it out with that. I mean, try removing it, try putting it, and if you find the ones that you put have more luck, then you have more luck, right? So that's the kind of I would kind of position that. Okay. Any more questions on resumes? Oh. Pete, go ahead, please.
Hopefully you can hear me now. So the other thing I've seemed to be finding is dealing with ageism.
Right.
And although I may look younger than I am, I'm still finding that I am in essence being gatekept because I've got all this great experience and have difficult getting a job because people see, just a small list of my experience, and or at least that's what it appears to be, anyways. Because I've actually been told that by a few different employers when I've actually went back and questioned them, why didn't I even get a call about this job? Because I easily fit the requirements for the position.
I see. I mean, I don't know. I haven't, maybe I'll take a look at your resume. So there are certain things that we can kind of do to reduce that effect. So I don't know if you have date of graduation on your resume for any of your degrees. I don't know.
I do, because typically they ask for formal education.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I've noticed that I've tested out for some of them. Obviously, they don't I've noticed certain for me, I don't really care, if people put it or not, right? So I've noticed that I've even started to recommend people if it's not a necessary thing, you don't need to put it. I haven't had my if you go to my resume. I don't know if I put it on this one, but I haven't had my the graduation date for a long time. So unless
it's almost on every job I've applied for.
You apply for, yeah. So if that's a requirement, then obviously it's needed. But it's there are certain things, for example, that I've noticed that you can kind of add the most recent 10 years of experience, rather than going beyond that. And if your resume is very filled out with a lot of range of experience, right, they might also make certain assessments be based on that. So those kind of two things is what I kind of I would say experiment with, basically trying out, basically avoiding putting the graduation date for schools, and then basically limiting your last 10 years of experience, right? Did you try any of that yet, or no?
Well, I've done both.
You have? Okay.
And then it keeps on getting asked for majority of jobs for formal education, so I kind of just filled it out and kept it on there, because it's just frustrating just to have to keep on putting the information in, and the auto filling doesn't always do a good job as well.
Right.
But I actually have 4 or 5 different resumes applying for different fields, different directions I could go. But again, in some resumes,
type of roles?
3.
What type of roles have you been applying for?
Project management, cybersecurity, management in general, civil and survey engineering, because I've got a strong background in that. I've got directions I could go.
Right.
But I just need the right opportunity.
I know. Okay. Let's do you have let's book a call. I want to take a look at your resumes, and maybe if they're saying that you're overqualified for things, or if it might be that you need to apply for a more higher role. Maybe we can explore that. Maybe might be something.
I've been trying higher and lower roles.
Yeah.
Too.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
So it's kind of a combination of either got too much or too little experience, or I'm missing my PMP, or I'm missing, or I'm missing this.
Yeah. Yeah. You have a PMP as well?
No, I'm working on it.
Okay.
But I haven't. If I had my PMP, I like last week I was headhunted by 3 different companies for a position,
Okay.
but because I don't have my PMP, I wasn't going to apply, even though I was willing
Okay.
to discuss it if they were willing to let me work on getting my PMP.
I know. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, because I mean, yeah, that's very interesting. If they, I mean, how long you been applying for?
Longer than I'd like. Let's put it that way.
Really? Okay.
I
We will
was
have
so
a
used to
chat.
getting a job within 2 days that
Yeah.
and although I do have another job, I can't actually physically do it because it's not good for my health, because I'm allergic to cigarette smoke and I'm allergic to coffee. And having to go into people's homes,
Oh, yeah.
that is not good for my health. And so I'm tired of being sick for 2 to 3 days to 2 to 3 weeks after doing stuff like that.
Okay, yeah. Well, let's have a deeper conversation. Actually, I'll give you some pointers on what you can try out, because that's because it's, if you already have experience, it makes no sense. But I have helped, like, all of a sudden, like, people have been applying to somebody who have helped recently. They've been applying for like literally a project engineer role, and for 6 years he's been applying. I was like, oh, no, okay, like, try this resume. And I did his resume, and then he literally got a got a role. So we'll try to check a few things out on what we can do. See what I can do to maybe guide you and help you out with
Greatly
that.
appreciate that. And thank you for listening to my sad sack story there.
No, I mean, I help with, like, for me, it's like not normal. I wouldn't say no. It's like I've been able to help people in that situation. So I know where you're going through. Let me see what I can do for you. Yeah, that's a clear career clarity call. So book a call and anyone who needs it, and we can kind of dive deeper into the resume and what one of the things that we create. So again, like, we'll talk about what are the things. So I help people create more than the resume, right? Like, one of the things that I will talk about, I have this so few tips before I actually go off the resume one. At the 7 sections I talk about, and again, people start, try to put everything in one page. I don't recommend it, and especially if you have had experience in your career, you don't need to set it to one page. Don't do that. You will see when it gets too cramped to look at it, right? So feel free to use 2 pages. Then, depending, again, based on the experience, you can even go to 3 pages, depending on how, like, for example, I have no problem reading 3-page resume, and if I'm hiring for like a senior role, project management role, right? So I kind of want to know what you have done. So make sure that you don't, especially people, if you're a student, I get it. You might probably have 1 or 2 roles, right? But if you're not a student, please go ahead and use more than 2 pages, sorry. And then creating multiple versions to test. Again, that's something that, like, I wouldn't say, like, customizing. I don't tell my clients to do that. I don't tell them to customize their resume for every job, which is a lot of work. But there is something else that I'm going to show you what you should customize, and I'll show you what it is soon. But the resume, I recommend just basically keeping a set, maybe 2 or 3 that you test out with, and then you can essentially keep the one that you feel happy with. Like, one of the biggest ways to know if your resume is good is that whether you feel happy with your resume, right? Because if you're not happy with your resume, when you're sending it, it's very likely other people will feel the same way, right? So that's why I'm telling you, like, take on a continuous improvement mindset with your resume. Even if it's not good, that's fine. At least you have something. But do what you can to improve it over time. Okay. And then edit as much errors as you can. Again, like, my grammar and editing was not the greatest before, but then I have found tools and things like that, right? So if you were using, like, there's this tool called Grammarly, right? So you can kind of use Grammarly to, like, edit out almost everything in your resume, right? So make sure that you can utilize that one. And there's another software, which is, if any of us are writers here, there's something, a Chrome app called Natural Reader. What it will do is that instead of you trying to read everything out, it will read it for you. All you have to do is just listen to it. So it's called Natural Reader. Let me see if it doesn't pop out like that. So essentially, it's like a Chrome app you can install, and it will start reading all the sentences and tenses in your screen. So you can do the same thing for your resume and catch errors, things like that. So one of the things that I like when I'm writing my books or anything, is that I put that through that. Basically, I get the audio to kind of repeat, right, and then I can catch anything. So that's one of the things I would say. So I do kind of those two to kind of catch errors, right, using Grammarly and using Natural Reader. So see if you can use that out to remove any grammar mistakes or anything like that. And then obviously, get it professionally written, right? So that's one of the things I recommend for people. If you're not really good at writing, and if you need somebody professional who can do it, get it done. But again, when you're hiring people, make sure that you can read some of their resumes from before, so you can get an idea of how they have written, and ask them about what kind of successes they had, right? So that's one of the things that I would recommend. Okay.